This is a movie that cannot be reviewed coherently unless I mention spoilers. So there's your warning, as I'm going to dive straight into my thoughts on Spider-Man No Way Home. This movie contains the most emotional story for Tom Holland's Spider-Man to date. The story throws plenty of conflict in Peter's way, from the multitude of villains he faces to saving those he loves from these conflicts. In a way, it's classic 101 in Spider-Man storytelling, but hey, as the old saying goes, if it ain't broke. The movie also delivers in explaining the multiverse in a clear way, as it gives you enough plot exposition without it ever becoming tiresome. That was a big danger going into this movie, was how they were going to explain the multiverse to audiences. Luckily, the movie delivers the exposition in traditional MCU fashion, one that is fun and interesting despite the bonkers elements of the story. The acting is stellar across the board, as you would expect in an MCU Spidey movie by now. Starting with Tom Holland, he delivers the most nuanced, emotional portrayal of Spider-Man to date. The script really allows Holland to show his dramatic acting chops in a way that the previous movies only allowed him to do on a surface level. He shows great chemistry with Zendaya, who, despite thus far being my least favourite character in the MCU, delivers the goods here in her portrayal of MJ. Despite the awkwardness of the character remaining from her previous outings, the emotional weight of this story allows Zendaya to bring more depth to her character than ever before. Now on to the villains, because I have mixed thoughts on this, surprisingly. While on the one hand, I love seeing these classic Spidey villains back on the big screen, it also feels like a missed opportunity with these characters. The movie on the whole doesn't do a lot with these villains in terms of character development, which felt inevitable given the number of evil do-gooders that appear. Having said that, all the characters playing these characters return to them with such ease and confidence. From Willem Dafoe's iconic menacing performance as the Green Goblin, to Alfred Molina, who once again oozes charisma as Doc Ock, you can tell that they're having an absolute blast playing these iconic characters. I just feel that if the story gave at least some of these villains anything resembling character arcs, then I think this movie would have gone up a notch in my opinion. Now, mentioning the cast without mentioning Andrew Garfield and Tobey Maguire would be the biggest crumb of this review. Seeing both of these actors reprise their roles as Spider-Man was a delight just on a pure level of nerdom. But rather than giving these actors throwaway cameos, they become important characters within the context of the third act. In particular, they serve to support Tom's character arc, especially in the wake of Aunt May's death. The rooftop scene between the three Spider-Men is perhaps the most emotional moment of the movie. It essentially underlines what makes Spider-Man such a relatable character for people all over the world. Jon Watts returns to the director's chair and once again plays to his strengths in this franchise in these smaller character moments. Watts never rushes through the emotional scenes, as it allowed me to care for the struggles that Peter goes through in the story. Despite the movie being 2.5 hours, I never felt the length, as Watts keeps the movie tightly knit from an editing standpoint. He ensures that there's little fat in this movie, with pretty much every scene serving a purpose from a story or character perspective. Though there's surprisingly not as much action as I would have expected, given the size and scale of the story, when it does come, it sure does pack a heavy punch. From the Doc Ock and Spidey bridge fight scene to the Statue of Liberty set piece, Jon Watts and the production team ensured that they delivered a visual spectacle for the audience, giving them a satisfying payoff. Speaking of the final action scene, seeing all three live-action Spider-Man fighting these classic villains was one of the most satisfying scenes I've seen in a movie, again just purely on a fan service level. Spider-Man No Way Home is a movie that on paper shouldn't function properly in any medium, let alone on the big screen. But huge credit goes to the filmmaking team for delivering a Spidey flick that has everything you would want out of a Spider-Man movie and more. From the emotional weight of the plot to the bonkers off-the-wall action, the movie ticks most of the boxes for a big-budget Spidey movie. The only real misstep for this movie is in the character arcs, or lack of, for the villains. Granted, it was always going to be difficult to give arcs for all of these villains. It still would have been nice if the movie gave at least some of the big villains, like Doc Ock, more in the way of development. Overall, I'm going to give Spider-Man No Way Home an 8.5 out of 10. So I'll now hand it over to you, as I want to find out your thoughts on No Way Home, and do you think this is the best Spider-Man movie, as I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comment section below. Thank you guys for watching, and as always, I'll see you in the next one.